More often than not, it is unwise, unnecessary, and ill advised to lend a man money if you are a woman. Now, I get asked about this quite a lot. I did a video many months ago, I think now, over on TikTok about lending men money and essentially, what women need to be thinking about, because it's actually incredibly common for men to ask women to give them money, because a lot of the time it ends up having to be a gift or a donation because they do not return the money as promised and as planned. Or maybe initially they do say that they want to borrow, okay? They want to be lent the money. And this is an ongoing area quite often, sometimes even of shame for a lot of women. We live in a world whereby we're told that a good rule of thumb is don't ever lend money that you can't afford to lose. Now, that's all well and good, but of course, what that phrase does not account for is often some of the interpersonal dynamics at play that mean that people are more inclined, okay, to give people money when they're asked. And so it's really important for us to have this conversation as adult women. I think that there's a lot of women of all ages. I mean, you only have to look at those kind of love rat scams and schemes. Women who once divorced tell the story of how they actually gave quite a bit of money, okay, to their husband, how they were even financially abused during the course of their marriage, okay? But often it's not until after the marriage is over that these conversations are happening openly, okay? And you also have the fact that, and I've heard this over many years, especially when I was younger and listening to podcasts, where men would say that you should be able to ask a woman that you are dating in a relationship with for money, okay? So it's very, very important. And what they do is they position this as evidence or a reflection of that woman's femininity, womanhood, but also her kind of commitment to him. And if, as a woman, you are not available, open to being asked for money, you are often accused of, judging the man harshly, unfairly, not being committed to him, not wanting to struggle and ride or die for a man, an adult man, who is asking you to give him money that belongs to you. Now, look, I'm going to go through a number of things that I think women should consider. And what I'm going to start by saying here as well, trust and believe I have been here. Because, by the way, I've lent money to female friends, £21,000 in fact, and that was unpaid because it was a scam. Okay, that friend stole the money from me. Okay, so when I talk about this, I'm not talking about it. Some of these things are not unique necessarily to men, but there are some nuances that are indeed unique to the interactions, certainly between heterosexual women and heterosexual men, whereby you'll find that women find themselves abandoning adult judgment and agreeing to give money to men that they never ever see again. And of course, there's a lot of shame, resentment, frustration, disappointment, sadness, all of the things. Because one thing that we have to be aware of, that, when I talk about money, look, money is a neutral, renewable resource that is available to anyone. And I genuinely believe that. And I believe that in the context of relativism. Okay, I'm not talking about, people in a far-flung war zone area. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about relative to those of us who are living in certain places in the world. Okay. Having said that, one of the things I find is that generally speaking, people do not respect money. And by that, they're willing to take money from other people. And this is gender irrelevant. Because they don't respect themselves, maybe the sweat equity that they put into making their own money, they give money. And like I said, it's never usually just transactional. There are usually other emotional nuances and factors that push and pull on your judgment. and then you agree to giving someone money, lending them money, and actually this person is a bad character, this person is a bad actor, this person had no intention of paying you back, or they believe they get to pay you back as and when they want to, or they believe that because you're dating or in a relationship or in a marriage, they do not have to respect your sweat equity. And I want you to hear me well here, because there are people who don't listen. And I'm going to be doing another video on listening and what it is as a skill, okay? Because some of this, as I say, is gender irrelevant in terms of not respecting the sweat equity that goes into making money, okay? There are women who don't respect money either. So, but what we will cover in this video is some of the nuances that certainly do apply to heterosexual female-male dynamic when money is in the mix here, okay? And so let's start here. Attraction changes judgment. And the thing about this is that men know this. Yeah, they know that attraction changes judgment. You'll see anecdotally men will say, they can do one thing to one woman who finds them attractive, and they'll do the same thing to another woman, and if she doesn't find him attractive, she has a completely different response. Right? Attraction changes judgment. And this is a huge one. Because at the end of the day, for a lot of women, if a female friend asks you to borrow money, you think differently to the way you think when a man asks you money, that you are attracted to, that you want to be chosen by, that you want to be desired by, especially when you're dating. Now, I'm not talking about first dates, because one of the things that I've learned since moving to New York, and I've listened and observed and listened to women who are in a culture where dating is its own matrix. And so the expectation that a man pays on a date, gives them money. This is like a norm in certain cultures, like the dating culture in the US, right? And so I'm not talking about like a first date, a man asking you out on a date and him paying. I'm talking about you're in the flow of dating, you're seeing someone, maybe it's a situationship, which makes these things even more insidious. So you're not formally committed in a marriage. You're not formally in a long-term relationship where there is equal investment. Established mutual investment, okay? And you are being asked whether you can lend money. And a lot of the time it's large quantities. Now, I know the word large is relative, but let's be honest. A lot of the time, sometimes the amount of money being requested is more than a month's salary, right? And actually, for you, a few $100s might be significant. A few $1,000s might be significant. Tens of thousands of dollars might be significant, and quite rightly so. Like I said, when you think about sweat equity, it doesn't matter how much the money is, right? But one thing I have observed is that sometimes there are things that women will do for a man that they are attracted to and they want to be chosen by, or they see a future with, which only they see. Future faking. Only that woman can see the potential in this man. He has not promised anything. He's not demonstrated anything. He has not evidenced anything about the future. But because of this is how she feels, she's lending that money. She's giving that money. But she wouldn't do it with her female friends. She wouldn't do it with a family member. I think we need to think really carefully about that. Yeah? When you're a woman who, for example, maybe you've got older children, and they come and ask you for financial assistance. No, you're not required or obligated to help them. But what I do think is interesting, there's a lot of women who will say no, under the premise that your child is now an adult, they need to live with the consequences of decisions that they've made. But when it comes to a man that you're dating, you do not apply the same metrics because you're attracted to him, because you want to be chosen by him, right? And so there is this piece about romantic hope and optimism changing your decision making. And that's something worth reflecting on, because a lot of the time when people say that they have boundaries, they're running a strict program, it's only in certain contexts. Now, you're free to change your mind. That's what adults, human beings, are free to do. But it's interesting when there's a lack of consistency around the principles being applied when it's a man in the picture. So that's the first thing to be honest with yourself about. Okay. The other thing is that money isn't only just money. It's never just coins and notes. Okay. Money is an energy. Okay. It comes with obligation, expectations, power, options, leverage, guilt. Like I say, hope. You see, the new word was investment. I see a lot of women, when they lend men money, what they're really doing is investing in a future that they hope to come to pass. I have known of women who, throughout the dating and the relationship, they lend that man money, they buy him things, and they're doing it because they believe the relationship is going somewhere, or that he will invest in them, i.e., be with them, stay loyal, be faithful, marry them, live with them. They're doing it in lieu of a future that they sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, have made up in their own head, because that man has not demonstrated over a period of time that he is leading the relationship in that manner at all. Okay. And so a lot of the time, of course, when the resentment grows or the disappointment grows, it is often because we have to be honest as women about the fact that you lent that money because you were seeing it as an investment, even though you had no contract, even though you essentially gave the money to someone because there was no real firm documentation around expectations around repayment. Are you adding interest? What period of time? Because this is the thing, when you go and borrow money from a bank or a lender or a creditor, there's an agreement, there's terms and conditions, and there are consequences. And more often than not, when a man's asking you for money, that's not the way he's asking the money for. Yeah? He's not coming to you and saying, I'll pay it in this time, you can add interest. No. Usually they're using sweet words. Usually they're asking for money before or after certain events in your relationship, whether it's before or after sex, before they may have done something for you, or after they've done something for you, or after a conversation you've had where you've lightly discussed the future. I'll never forget, there was one man who asked me for money, and when I obviously declined, he then said to me, well, you're very businesslike in your approach. You know, this isn't about business. You should allow your emotions. I started laughing. I started laughing because it is, yes, everything should be about clarity, transparency, expectations, respect, and dignity. And here a man is trying to convince me that I'm being too businesslike when he's asking to borrow multiple 5 figures from me. Okay? This is very important because you will be positioned as selfish, unkind, unnecessarily distrustful, not being feminine, womanly, not being able to see into the future, not, trusting them, believing in them. That's not your business when you're an adult. It's not your business. Okay? That's not your business. Do not get bamboozled into these things. And to this day, I do not regret the fact that I never get. And you know what? It's happened more than once. And by the way, it's not because I announced that I have money. It's not me who's brought it up. You'd be surprised. And a lot of the time people are ashamed to talk about this because people will say, not me, I run a strict program. No man would ever ask me money. Let me tell you something. It's not about you. A lot of the time these men are opportunists and they're chancers. And like I say, it's not unique to men. The opportunists and the chancers can be women too. But we're not talking about that in this video. But in this instance, a lot of the time as a woman, you do not need to look inwards and think, what's wrong with me? I'll come on to what might be shaky within you in a moment, but it's not actually always personal to you. A lot of the time, these men have done this before. They've asked other women before, or they can see that you are insecure, that you lack self-esteem, that you're a bit wishy-washy with your boundaries. They can see that you want them more than they want you. In fact, they can see that you want a relationship more than you respect yourself. Remember, I've talked before about the importance of you should never love someone more than you respect yourself. It doesn't matter who it is. Your dignity, your self-respect, your self-esteem, those things should be the priority. You should never love anybody more than you respect yourself. This is very important. And a lot of the time, men who are more experienced with navigating women and getting what they want, whatever it might be, emotional support, sex, money, her time, her company, her presence, they know what they're doing. And I'm going to be doing another video on this Because one thing you need to understand is that, you know what, men are not master manipulators, but they're also not as stupid as you've been led to believe they are. And there are men who've had years of experience whereby you're on the letter D and he's on the letter Z. You just can't see it. And he has been observing you, clocking you, not just the things that you say, the things that you do, and whether or not you're consistent. It's an energy. And so a lot of the time, the chances and the opportunists, they know exactly what buttons to push to increase the chances of them getting what they want from you. And I say this to you as a young, well, I'm 37, I'm not young, right? But when I was coming up, I was green, naive. I was that honest girl, the honest Christian girl who took people on face value. Yeah, the kind of person who would lose sleep at nighttime worrying about people, regardless of their gender, might I add. How are they feeling? Have they got food today? I would never like to be in that situation. That was me, yeah? When I used to pray daily, I would mention people in prayer because I could not fathom, I could not bear to think that someone was going without and how that might feel. Yeah. I've cured myself of that sickness now. So there were times, especially in my early 30s in particular, when I first ventured into experimenting with dating. Let me tell you, the tells are all there. Yeah, I had to learn real quickly. And some of you will have to learn the hard way because it really doesn't matter what I say. Doesn't matter what anybody else says, because some of you think you're above the program. You think you're going to be the one that jumps the fence. And I want to be really clear here. Right? It is always better for you as a woman to err on the side of caution when it comes to a man asking you for money, and I don't care who it is. Right? Do not confuse empathy with responsibility. You can care for someone. You could recognize that maybe a situation might be difficult. Maybe you've seen the evidence that he doesn't have any money. You've seen the evidence that his car's about to be repossessed. You've seen the evidence that he's struggling to buy food. That doesn't make it your responsibility as an adult woman. Also be aware of how early they ask you. Yeah, because some of them, they've got different tactics, boo. Different tactics. Some of them will ask real early to break you in. Yeah. Others will wait, as I say, until you've had sex or until you've had some conversations about the future, until they've asked you what you're looking for. They'll wait until they ask you. And what they'll do is sometimes they trickle. They won't go straight to asking you for £15,000. For example, they might ask you for a few hundred. And then or they might ask you to buy something in particular. So at first it's not hard cold cash being transferred. At first it might be that they ask you to buy something. And I'm not talking about buy dinner. Right? It might be an item or something like that. And they're very clever with it too. Because when I say clever, I mean they know what they're doing. This is not accidental. I need you to understand that part. It's not accidental. Yeah, and some of you are meeting men. They have family and friends. Why haven't they asked their family and friends? Why are they asking you? You just met them. You barely know them. Why are they asking you? Why are you their first point of call? And even if you weren't the first, why are you on the list at all? Now, some of you might be thinking you should be flattered because, he's being vulnerable. Yeah, he's opening up to me. And so I must have done something to earn his trust. Do not get bamboozled. Ruinous empathy. Ruinous empathy. You can care deeply for someone without financing them. You can care deeply for someone without financing them. The other thing that's really important for you to look at as a woman is the pattern. Because you see, a lot of the time when a man asks you for money, he presents it as a one-off. You see, he's presenting it to you like it's a one-off. But actually, a lot of the time, it's a pattern of financial irresponsibility, for example. It's a pattern. You might not be able to see the pattern straight away because maybe this is the first time he's asked you for money. But actually, it is a pattern. And so, again, err on the side of caution and say no, because what you'll find is you say yes once and then they want to ask again. And the other thing is women get shamed for talking about these things publicly because what men say is, see, you can't open up to women. No, you can't do some nonsense and expect someone to be silent about it and never share it with somebody else. Because here's the thing for us to remember often as women, talking saves lives. Talking shares knowledge. But what the world has done, especially in certain cultures and communities and religions, what they do is they portray women as gossips. Yeah, especially if you come from an Abrahamic religion and the Bible talks about the older women not gossiping. There's a difference between gossip and simply actually speaking up. I'll never forget, I'll tell you this, and it wasn't a man in this instance, it was an old female friend. We are not friends anymore. She stole £21,000 from me. And we were both in a business group of black female entrepreneurs. And I remember months after it happened, I just happened to be having a conversation with someone, and they mentioned the fact that she had asked them for money. It turned out she had asked, the group was like 8 women. Okay, she'd asked one, me, I was 1, 2. She'd asked 4 of the 8 women for money. Now, the other women were smarter than me. You see, me, back then, stupid. I went to bed thinking, gosh, she's got nothing, da da da, and I gave her the money and then she stole it. She's never repaid a dime. I can tell you that story on another day because I learned a lot about myself and the gaps that needed to be healed over. But you see, if one person in the group hadn't have said anything, the other people may have been thinking it was just them. And I would have continued to think I was the only one. And I wasn't the only one. I was one of 4 women who had been asked by this same woman to lend her money. Yeah, talking saves lives. And what a lot of men are counting on is that you don't say anything to anybody else. And then what they do is say, oh, you've broken my consent. You know, you revealed my business. That's why you can't trust women. That's why we don't open up to women. No, 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 no. It's not just any behavior that can run. And then because of confidentiality and a woman respecting a man and his vulnerability, you don't tell anybody. No, that's how people suffer in silence. There are certain things, talk. That's one of the reasons why I do this work, because there's a lot of practical wisdom. There's a lot of practical wisdom, not just information that women need to know. And because we don't talk enough as women, I told you about the fact that women don't listen, but that's a different story altogether. Because we don't talk enough, people suffer for longer than they need to. And so a lot of men who are bad actors are relying on you not saying a damn word to anybody else. They rely on you not saying a damn word to anybody else. So there are various tactics they will use. And then in the process, what they do is they set it up. And if you don't have your head screwed on right, if you don't have self-respect, what happens is you agree to do things that you know deep down is unwise, ill-advised. But then you've only got yourself to sit with after. Because you can go back and say, I didn't force you. I didn't pressure you. It was your choice. You see how that works? This is why I'm always encouraging you to get your mind right. Move into psychological adulthood. Because then somebody else's desire and request is not the nucleus. You're not orbiting around his desire and request. You're orbiting around your own common sense, your own judgment, self-respect, self-authority. When you orbit your decisions around that, you move differently. It's a reduced opportunity for anybody, man, woman, child, dog, to come and run circles around you. And so if you do make a decision to lend a man money, you better know why you're doing it. And then you can stand by that decision at some point in the future if things go upside down, right? This is so, so important. Does this man have a pattern of asking people for money? Does he have a pattern of asking you for money? Is it really an emergency? Because here's the other thing. Everybody's definition of emergency is very different. And a lot of the time, the men who are well-versed at asking women for money, they will present everything as life and death and emergency. You know, it's the hand, head in hand, head sunken down, sitting on the stairs. What they do is they speak aloud and tell you how difficult things are, that they'll figure it out. I remember one man said to me, after I declined to give him money, I remember months later, he said to me, oh, you made me a stronger man. Thank you for, what you did made me stronger. Notice the language, what you did. Meanwhile, I'm an adult. It's my money. I am well within my rights to say no. I didn't do anything to him. But now he's trying to reverse psychology it and say, well, what you did made me stronger. Brother, you're an adult. You should have had that in check. I shouldn't have been on the list of people you thought you could ask in the first place, actually. So I sat there in silence, you see, because I knew what was really happening. Mind games is what's happening. But because I've decided to orbit around my dignity, my self-respect, it don't matter what somebody else thinks about how I make decisions about my money, especially when it comes to a man, right? And so a lot of the time, women are lending because they've imagined a future. They see it as an investment. They see it as an act of care. And they think and believe that that act of care has the same value to that man as it does to you. It don't, boo. It don't. Because, by the way, you giving a man money is not going to make him respect you, make him want you, make him commit to you for life. That's not how it works. You just need to look at the evidence that's out there. Look at the evidence that's out there. The other thing for you to think about on a practical level, are you giving from surplus or from longing? Is this truly generosity? Or are you seeking approval and wanting to be chosen in some kind of way? Are you giving because you have genuine capacity? Are you giving because you want to be seen as kind, supportive, different to the other women? You see, the men who have very, either toxic or difficult relationships with their own mothers. They talk about the fact that their siblings aren't there for them. They don't have friends. It's a hard life. I'm going to be very direct here. The men maybe who are immigrants. Yeah, they come over to the country, whether it's the US or the UK, and they have nothing. They're staying in a shared accommodation with people they don't know. They're doing a job that is particularly laborious. Maybe they're juggling it with studying at the same time. I've heard the stories, boo-boo. I've heard all the stories. You see, it's all specifically placed. Because what's meant to happen in you as a woman is that the light bulbs are meant to start going off. You're meant to start activating and starting to perform womanhood, perform nurture. Prove yourself. That's the invisible, unspoken. Prove yourself to me. Prove yourself. Prove that you're a woman. Prove that I can choose you as a wife. So they tell the story beautifully. Beautifully. And it's usually the same language. If you listen to the women who've given men money, women they've been married to, in long-term relationships, just dating, situated, it doesn't matter what it is. Often the stories are kind of recycled and repurposed. Yeah? Even the scamming stories. Even the scamming stories. They are all repurposed and recycled because there ain't no new story to tell. But what it does is it activates something in a woman, the thing that is embedded in you from girlhood, to prove, perform, goodness, care, nurturing. You see, and what they do is they know just how much more water to tip into the bowl to make that cake work, you see. They'll know, is she really insecure? Maybe she's not dated in years or months. So he'll play the game. Yeah, he might romance you because he can tell that you've not had that recently. Maybe he takes longer during the sex because he can tell you've never really had sensual sex before. I know this is uncomfortable for people. They know what they're doing. Give it enough time. They've observed enough about you. And that's the reason why. Yeah, they know what buttons to press and when and how much water to tip in. So they tell the sob story about how hard their life has been, how hard it is wherever they've come from. How it's rough out there for men. The system doesn't support men. If they've already got kids, they'll tell you about the crazy ex-partner. But when you dig deeper, they were never in a long-term relationship with her either. When you dig deeper, the reason why they might be struggling with accommodation right now is because the last place they lived in belonged to the ex-partner. So they've never had a place of their own. They've gone from house to house, from mother to woman to woman to woman. Council tax has not seen their name on the bill before. You see, this is what I'm saying. Is it a pattern? Yeah, they tell you about the kids and how difficult it is to pay child support. The other day, I saw some foolishness. Sometimes I don't have you can tell I don't have the tolerance for this kind of foolishness. And I've been like this from day dot. When it comes to certain sob stories that men tell, no, I'm not the one. Yeah, there's other ways when I was green that I could be got. There was a man, he told his partner, they'd been dating for 18 months. He told her that he only had 2 kids. Turns out he had 3. But the reason why I didn't mention the third is because she's the oldest and it's with a woman that he doesn't like. He never sees the child anyway. Yeah. And he didn't. And there were women on that live saying that, there could be reasons why he's hidden this child. And, you have to see him as a good man now, even though he's been leaning on this partner, the current one, to give him money. Are you insane? This is what I mean. Sometimes the practical wisdom, you see, is some women, you're foolish and you're giving foolish advice to other younger women who deserve better. You're encouraging younger women to doubt their own judgment, good judgment about someone's character. A lot of them know what collection. It's like a puzzle. They know the pieces and where to put it so that you start abandoning measured judgment. You start abandoning a sober mind and you start prioritizing your desire for that man to see you in a certain way. And also often your desire for the relationship you're hoping for. The way you'd like the relationship to be, not what it actually is right now. Okay, it's very important. And I can tell you this, I can remember one particular woman who's in my life, right? Older woman to me. If I didn't have her, because sometimes what I've had to do is tell her something deliberately so I can hold myself accountable, especially in my green early days after I went out into the world. Yeah? Practical, measured, sober-minded wisdom that comes from women who mean good for you. Women who want to see you well and healthy. They don't want to see you distressed and in pain. Women who don't bring some nonsense, their own insecurities, lack of self-esteem, their own history of accepting squalid behavior from men. Sorry, a lot of women are damaged. They are hurt in terms of previous. So because they're trying to survive and because they still want to be chosen by a man, they will rationalize and justify these things. And when a young woman comes along and says, you know what, this is what I'm experiencing, she's going to tell you some foolishness. That's what she's going to tell you. And I know this as a woman who is single by choice. The amount of times, men and other women say you're just saying that because you're single. Let me tell you something. I am the main shareholder of my life, my identity, my value, and my worth. You see, and when you're moving from that place in life, you don't want to see other people in distress. And when a young woman in particular, no, that's not, I'm sorry. When you have women who have spent their life being male-centered, a lot of their advice you cannot trust when you're a young woman coming up. You can't trust their advice. Especially if 9 times out of 10, the advice is stay. But understand his point of view. Or maybe he meant that. No. Don't abandon sober-minded, good judgment. Because like I said, a lot of you wouldn't do the same thing if it was your sister, a female friend asking you for money. Hell, some of you, even if it was your adult child, you would not agree to this. And yet because this man, you find him attractive, you've had sex with him, you're saying yes. So a lot of the time we need to examine ourselves as women as to why did I make this decision? What was really happening? What was really going on to make me think that this was a wise decision? If someone has not demonstrated commitment, reliability, consistency, because a lot of you, these are situationships. This is a man that tells you that we'll see how it goes. We'll go with the flow. He's saying that he's not sure if marriage is for him. He doesn't even believe in marriage. So what future are you faking to justify lending him money? If a man can't even tell you and show you consistently where you are in his esteem in the future that he's actively building, not the pipe dream, boo, then how can you lend him money? Because when you ask about the future, he doesn't know. We will go with the flow. So that means when you ask him about paying you back, he doesn't know. We'll go with the flow. We'll see. You see how that works? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Now, what I will say here, you don't even need to characterize someone as a bad person. You don't need to characterize yourself as a bad person. What I'm talking about is being sober-minded, mature. And what happens when you say no? How does he behave? Like I said to you, I had one guy stop talking to me for months, and then he came back and said, what you did made me stronger. Listen, the months of him not talking to me was the answer. That was the answer. That revealed his character and his intention, because I can guarantee you, if I had given him the money, I wouldn't have heard from him again either. Do you see where I'm coming from? You think it would be different because if you said yes, then he would stick around. He'd love you more. He'd respect you more. He's definitely going to choose you. No, 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 no. You see, women have learnt the hard way, right? They've learnt the hard way. When you're turning yourself into gas, water, and air, to please a man, to be chosen by a man, to be more desirable in his eyes, you know what happens? You evaporate. Your dignity evaporates. Your self-respect evaporates. And one day you wake up and think, who am I? How did I get here? That's what happens when you keep ship-shaping to be chosen by a man, instead of moving into psychological adulthood. Going through what might be an uncomfortable feeling in the moment of saying no and being asked, why are you saying no? Or being told that, oh, you're only saying no because you don't trust me. Oh, that doesn't show that you believe in me. That doesn't show that you're support. See, this is how women are. This is why men don't open up. No, you don't need to open up about foolishness is the point. It's not every opening up that is of good character. No. So what commitment has actually been demonstrated? Is the relationship established? Or are you filling in the gaps with hope and optimism? Is there reciprocity? Because that's the other one. You know, one thing I will tell you is that some men will never ever buy you anything. And when I say buy, I'm not even talking about designer or large material items. Yeah? They do maybe very cheap dates and whatever, and then they ask you for money. They don't remember anything about you, your personality, your likes, your dislikes, even down to the small details. They don't do flowers. They don't do holidays because these are commercial things or they're pagan. It doesn't really say anything about how I feel about you. It's all a money grab. So they don't do any of the small things that might matter to you, but they can ask you for money. You see how that works? Does the request fit the stage of the relation? Like I said, are you well into a marriage? Has he demonstrated financial irresponsible behavior before this? These are totally valid questions to ask. And if somebody gets a bit annoyed, starts turning it back on you, starts accusing you, starts talking about your personality, your character, when you ask what are adult questions, because like I said, if they went to the bank's going to ask him these questions. And the reason why they haven't gone to the bank is because they don't want to answer those questions. Do you see how that works? Can they realistically pay you back? Because this is another one. A lot of the times, 9 times out of 10 people can't pay you back for the money that they're asking for. It's actually very rare. It's very rare that people can actually afford to pay you back. That's the truth. It's very rare that they can actually afford to pay you back. So what happens is women focus on the promise. They don't look at the reality. Remember, I'm always saying respond to reality. He doesn't have the money right now. It's a large amount of money. You know what his job is, usually. So where's he going to come up with that money from to pay you back? So does he actually have a stable income, a realistic repayment plan, which you shouldn't have to beg for, by the way? He should come to you with saying, this is how I'm going to pay you back. And this is, you see, that's, they're not doing that quite often. The last thing I'm going to say, because there's plenty I could say on this. One thing that I have as a personal rule in my life is I have realized and I've learned that most people do not have integrity when the chips are down. I've told you before how I've had multiple 6 figures in debt, and I've done everything I can to pay that debt back. Because that's about my character, my ethics, my conscience, and my integrity. So there have been times where the chips have been down. When I had those multiple 6 figures debt, the chips were down, obviously. I had just closed the business. I had to restart an old business and make money, not only to pay off that debt, but also to pay for my living expenses. But I paid that debt off. When the chips were down, right? My integrity drove me forward. Now, what I will say to you is that in my experience, and having listened to many a wise woman and man, the people up in years who pass on and impart wisdom, is most people don't have the integrity. When the chips are down, they do not have the integrity that would be required of them to pay you back. I'm telling you that for free. It's very rare that you meet people in this life where things are going really wrong for them, that they have the integrity to still treat you with respect. And when it comes to money, still pay you back. It's very rare. I've learned that the hard way, but I've also learned it through my own experiences. And I know this for sure. Having had to pay, I have paid people back, not even with resentment, because it was important to me to do. I know what it takes. I know what it takes and what it takes to come through on the other end, even when payments are late, delayed, whatever the case might be. And I'm telling you that most people don't have that integrity. They do not. I've had a friend once say to me, she owed me money, and 1 month she just literally texted me and said, I'm not paying you this month. I will pay you when I can. Right? This is what I'm saying. Self-authority isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone. You do not have to characterize him as a bad man. You don't even need to do all that. You're doing too much already, right? It's not even about never helping people, but what does that help mean? What does it cost you? Yeah? It's about making sure that if you do choose to be generous, as it were, it's an expression of your values and your risk appetite, not because you are fearful of not being chosen, and not because you are future faking and investing in a future that does not exist. So you are free to do what you will. But these are some of the questions you have to honestly ask yourself when a man asks you for money.